All right, let me get my screen shared. Okay, can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Need to find a, okay, perfect. I need to find a better way to get the grid for this to show, but not super necessary right now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the November 14th, 2024 meeting of the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan Civic Advisory Committee, or CAC. My name is Ben Demers. I'm a senior planner in economic development with the city of Somerville, and I also serve as the staff support to the Civic Advisory Committee. I'll just make a quick note that this meeting this evening is being held through Zoom webinar, which we are using for most public meetings still with the city. But just a note about the technology. So under what is called under open meeting law guidance from the state, we have to disable the chat function to avoid what is called side conversation, which isn't allowed in public meetings. But it just means that if you are a member of the public with us this evening and you have a comment you would like to make, rather than using the chat function, please just raise your hand. And then I will call on you to make a comment. We will have a public comment period in the agenda this evening, but if you have a comment at any point, please just raise your hand and I will call on you to speak. I'm going to walk through our agenda quickly. So we're going to start with a roll call of members and then hopefully do an approval of the previous meeting summary. We'll then get a development update for 299 Broadway. So we have Darcy Jameson here from Beacon Communities just to tell us a bit about what has happened with the project in the last month. We were back at the ZBA with some small changes, so just want to talk through that, make sure everybody feels informed. Then we'll leave time for neighborhood updates from Civic Advisory Committee members. And then at the end, we'll have a public comment period before we adjourn. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add to this agenda? And I'm really sorry if you hear the clicking in the background. Okay, so with that, I'm going to shift into doing a roll call. Okay, so when I call your name, please just say here, and especially as I'm getting to know everyone, I apologize. If I say anyone's name incorrectly, please just let me know, and so that I pronounce it correctly in the future. So first on my list here is Breck Bailey, who is unable to join us this evening. Councillor Jesse Klingon.
Present.
Councillor Jake Wilson.
Sorry, trying to unmute. Present.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor. Ani Ajemian.
Present. It's Ani Ajemian.
Ajemian. Thank you.
Yep.
Colby Keys.
Kai's present.
Kais, thank you. Denise Lowers is not able to join us this evening. Arthur Gonzalez.
I am present. It's Gonçalves.
Gonzalez, thank you. Renee LeWinter. I believe I saw Renee. Renee, are you able to hear us audio-wise? I can. Yeah, well, we can't hear you, but I see that you're speaking, so I can mark you present.
And unmute it. Okay.
There we go. Thank you. Nick Techlitz. No, that's no problem.
Present.
Adrian is not able to join us this evening. And then Raymond Estrella.
Yeah, present.
Perfect. And then we did not do this last time just because there were so many new members, but generally after we do roll call, I will just ask if everyone has had a chance to review the meeting summary that I sent around ahead of time for the previous meeting. And if you have any updates, I can make them, but otherwise we'll just ask that you, and again, we kind of vote through consensus here. So if everyone kind of says Yes, they look good. Then I can post those to the meeting summary on the city's calendar.
Yes, they look good.
Look good.
Amazing.
Yep.
Thank you all. So with that, I'm going to shift into our first substantive agenda item. I'm going to stop sharing screen for a second. So as I mentioned, Darcy Jameson, who's Vice President of Development with Beacon Communities, is here this evening just to give us a bit of an update about the project. Scott Lombardi had hoped to be here, but he had a family emergency come up, but Darcy will definitely be able to give this update. So I'll pass things over to you, Darcy.
Yeah, thank you. Just for the record, I'm Darcy Jameson, Vice President of Development at Beacon Communities, Boston-based developer working in partnership with Mark Development on the redevelopment of the 299 Broadway site in Somerville. I know that we chatted with you all last month, and a little bit has happened, not a whole lot, but a good milestone. We went back to well, let me just say, in these types of large scale developments, things evolve kind of as you tighten up your plans and specifications and advance towards your closing. And so we went back to the ZBA to talk about some of the kind of insubstantial changes to the plans and specifications, like just talked through the phasing of like how we're going to build the project, tearing down the buildings, starting building A, starting building B, finishing all the landscaping and site work, and public use spaces through the middle of the site. So, reviewing some of the landscaping, and kind of just timing. So nothing, let me just say, we are still doing everything that we said we were going to do per the comprehensive permit and what you've all been seeing and experiencing. If you see me look away, I'm just looking at my notes. And the other thing we talked about, and this is sort of my update for you with the ZBA, is kind of what's next. So, over the last year or so, we've been advancing the design of our buildings and the site. That's all going smoothly, consistent with what we've all agreed to. And then the other side of our work, and somewhat more challenging in today's environment, is putting together all of the financing with lenders and investors and the state. And continuing to work with the city on many of the other documents that are referenced in the comprehensive permit that we need to have in place. Some of the easement agreements, agreement on how the Winter Hill community space will be used, and the ACE rental space. So just kind of all the stuff that you have to do for your lenders and investors and have in place. So all of that is moving along. Ben and Emily and team have been just incredibly helpful because these are like behemoths to move. We still have a goal of breaking ground and getting into construction later next spring, early summer. That is the goal. That may happen. It may shift depending on financial markets. But that's what we're all pushing to. And to get there, as I said, it's like finishing up the permitting and city approvals. We'll be applying for our building permit. We're getting a lot of our financing lined up, and we'll start to work with the state kind of once we're in like kind of full readiness to proceed, and be pushing towards that closing. The other thing that I mentioned to the ZBA and that I just wanted to reiterate here because it came up in the last COC meeting and just wanted to acknowledge it sort of everywhere public is we're not going to do anything that takes anybody by surprise. As we get closer to starting construction, we'll be in touch to have a community, through this group, a broader community meeting if folks want. We'll talk about what activity to expect. We'll make sure we tell you what the process will be for regular updates, who to get in touch with if you have any concerns. But, we're large developers. We've done a lot of large new construction projects like this, and the general contractor that we'll work with as well. So very mindful about in construction, snow removal, sidewalk safety, all that good stuff. So that's my not so short update, but just to kind of say like everything's kind of moving forward as we would hope it would be moving forward, with lots of stuff going on behind the scenes.
Awesome. Thank you, Darcy.
Sure.
So as we were talking about before we started the meeting, Darcy has a hard stop at 6, but figured we could take this point if there are any questions. Raymond?
Hi, thank you. So I wasn't at the last meeting, but I watched the recording, so I have some questions around parking. So my understanding from what Darcy and Scott mentioned in the last meeting was that 50% of the market units will have an opportunity to get parking passes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So this, I live in the area, so I know Broadway has a bus lane, which already has eliminated a lot of parking there. Well, how is that going to impact street parking in the area with all those units having a potential of having parking on street? Is there any kind of contingencies or any thoughts around the parking situation?
Ben, I think I'm going to defer to you to answer that on behalf of the city.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Raymond, I'll be honest, some of the research that was done into this is before my time with this project. So what initially projects of this size generally will look to do it's like subsurface parking on site. With this parking, however, because of environmental concerns, that became infeasible. The cost that would have been associated with cleanup to do the parking underground on site would have just made this an infeasible project. And so that was why they shifted to having availability of on-street parking passes in the neighborhood around it. At that time, from my understanding, they had done a parking study to understand sort of what capacity the streets could still hold. And that went into the decision around the 50%. But just to be frank, I wasn't there for some of that conversation. I don't know if Councillor Klingon or Councillor Wilson, if you remember any other context from that time, but alternatively, I can also just kind of ask more from our team that brought this through the initial permitting, sort of what more of that logic was. But
Just to jump in on that one, Councillor Klingon, did you want to field that one, or you want me to?
Not anything that you missed. Can you hear me?
just say that one more time, sorry.
I said to Councillor Wilson, go right ahead. I said I'll jump in if I hear anything that you missed.
All right. So yeah, this was probably the main sticking point during the original process that went through the Zoning Board of Appeals. So to be clear, it's not just that 50% of units will be eligible for parking permits. It's that there are going to be a set number of special parking permits that they use the formula basically of the half the number of units, but it's not like half the units can get 2, 3, 4 parking permits. The other part to that, as I recall, they're going to be priced very differently than the typical $40 a year resident parking permit. They're going to carry a significantly higher cost, as I recall. And as for the parking study that was done, yeah, I had concerns about that. I'm going to be blunt. We're going to feel it. I live in the neighborhood too. Like, we're going to feel it on the street. It's the one real downside to this project. But we felt, well, I'll speak for me. I felt as a city councilor that the huge benefits on the other side did outweigh that parking crunch. But I just want to be real about that. Yeah, it's going to be a negative impact to the project.
Yeah, and I'll just add, this was thoroughly discussed and voted on and decided before we got to this point. So I think the parking discussion that, I'll say bluntly as well, is that discussion is kind of over. And with regards to, as Jake said, it will be felt, and that we had to consider trade-offs with what we're getting here and with something happening at the location. So, we're hoping that with the proximity to the Green Line and other modes of transportation, that you know, it's not as dramatic as people might think, sometimes these things have a way of working themselves out where it's not going to be so bad, but this certainly going to be felt in the neighborhood. No
Yeah, I
question.
mean, I will say, I mean, that's the feedback. I mean, one of the first topics that comes up when this project is mentioned is the parking situation, which is, we've already been taking a lot of parking spaces from people in all across the city. And that's just a major concern for people that I've spoken to about the project.
Can I just say absolutely? Like I said, I'm a neighbor. I live right on Jake Street, right around the corner from the site, and that's absolutely consistent with the conversations that I've had with neighbors. It's a real concern, and yeah, there are mitigating plans here. The mobility plan that's been put in place to look to basically decrease the demand for parking for future residents of the site. But yeah, it's we need to name it. It's important that we name this. It's going to be a challenge.
Hi, this is Ani. I'm sorry if I'm not raising my hand properly for speaking up for a moment, but would it be possible, and maybe they're already made available, but to have the traffic study, any kind of mitigation approach that the project thought through available to the public for view, and just so people can kind of dig in a little bit deeper? Because this is like the number one question that comes up often, at least in my conversations with the neighbors. I feel like more information would be helpful so people can kind of dig into the background a little bit deeper on their own as well.
Sure, that's a public study from my understanding. So I believe it's posted on the reports and decisions page on the city's website, which is not always the easiest to navigate. So let me look to find it and share it with CSC members.
That'd be great. My guess is it probably answers a lot of repeat questions, right? Like how it was viewed, what was, any kind of implementation of mitigation efforts to help, that sort of thing. I think would be really helpful for people to take a look at.
Yeah, I can send that over email.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I saw sorry, Renee, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah,
There's a queue that I've been,
sorry, looking at contingency.
Renee, I apologize. There is a queue that I've been working off of with hand, so I just want to,
Sorry.
but I will make sure that I also do call on you, I promise. Councillor Klingon, was your hand just up around, yours was the next hand that I saw come up, but was it just around responding to the parking piece?
No, it's a question for the developer for Beacon.
Okay. Okay, do you want to go next?
Sorry, Darcy, right?
Yeah, yes, hi.
Yeah, so Darcy, yeah, just a quick question. I mean, you said it, but I kind of missed it. And I also just want to make sure that it's clear to everybody at this point. When are you expecting to break ground? And the second part of that is, my understanding is that Beacon will be building first. Is that correct?
Yeah, hi, nice to see you tonight. We're hoping to break ground late spring, early summer. We have a lot of work ahead of us still putting together the financing, but that's the target that we're driving towards. If that evolves, we will keep people posted. And first step is obviously demolition of the buildings and getting the site pad ready. Building A, which is the Beacon building, will start first, and expect shortly thereafter that building B would start to come out of the ground.
They would be being built. So even though it's separate entities, they'll be being built simultaneously.
We hope so. We're still working through the details and the financing.
Okay. Thank you.
But
That's all.
that's our hope.
Thank you for that. That's all, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor.
We'll update on that as we go along. We're all actively out in the markets right now, trying to put things together.
Yeah, no, very exciting. Really hoping for that spring groundbreaking.
Me too. Thank you.
Arthur.
Hi, did that 50% of market rate units being able to get parking passes consider that like the streetscape might get changed, like Temple Street might get a reduction in parking and maybe some other areas?
I'm not sure how the consideration of changes to the streetscape impacted the parking study. I do, and again, I'll share the parking study afterwards, and I always want to like answer questions around concerns for the parking piece of things because I want to make sure people feel informed so that they can help people understand more. I think to a point that Councillor Klingon made is that like this permission has been given in the approval in the comprehensive permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So definitely want to make sure that people are feeling informed, but there was a lot of conversation that kind of went in at the time to, even though this is still something that people have concerns about, like getting to the point where people felt that the project was worth moving forward with, even with the parking that it was going to add.
So no, it wasn't considered like at the, I just want to understand if like changes to the streetscape was considered while this 50% would be allowed to pick up parking spaces. I'm sorry if I'm wording that poorly.
No. I mean, do you just, so are there particular changes to the streetscape that you're asking
Yes.
about? I don't know that the parking study, I think the parking study would have considered existing conditions rather than like what, if there was any proposed changes to the streetscape, but curious if there are any specific streetscape
I'm not
changes.
asking so much as the parking study, but like when the decision was made, how many of these units would be able to get parking that like future changes to the street would be considered in that like I'm sorry if that's not really making sense.
No, it's fine. Are there what kind of changes are you thinking that might happen? Or
So like Temple getting a redesign that would reduce the amount of parking spaces on that street.
so you're saying when they counted the spots? All right, that's a good question because yeah, I mean I can tell you that the audit that you saw happen on Broadway, where we're bringing our streets up to Massachusetts codes and standards. You probably noticed there were some parking lots in front of the bakery. That audit is going to continue. I'm not sure if, I don't know that they haven't gone down Temple yet, but there may, I will have to talk to Brad and take a look at that, the parking study. And Jake, you don't recall off the top of your head, do you, that they were considering any type of changes to the current streetscape or parking?
No,
situation?
the big change, as Councillor Kling alluded to, the big change already happened, which was the addition of that pedestrian island on Temple Street that did result in the removal of some spots. To be clear, the daylighting, as they call it, basically marking off those spots within 20 feet of an intersection that did result in some folks feeling as if parking spots had been lost. Those spots were always illegal under Mass General Law. This is merely a way of making sure that people are aware of that and don't then get a parking ticket out of lack of knowledge of the fact that you're not allowed to park within 20 feet of an intersection. So should not, the changes that you're seeing, if you see those the hatch marks around intersections, that's basically a public information campaign by engineering and mobility to make sure that people are aware of that state law and don't inadvertently get a ticket.
Well, Counselor, I think the question is when they did the parking study, did they count those spots as spots? Not that at the end of the day.
I assume that they understand Mass General Law and would not have counted those. It's more what was open, and my issue with it, as you might recall, was the dates and time of day when they did it. I believe showed excess inventory beyond what is typically there in the area.
Yeah. But Arthur, as been stated, like certainly there's going to be challenges with parking. I mean, there are now. This is certainly going to be felt in a city like Somerville where we're dense and where there's a lot of vehicles. But as we get denser and as we get sort of, if you think about boroughs of New York City where, or even if you ever lived in the North End, I did for a period of time, the expectation of parking can't be, it's not a guarantee. You don't get a guaranteed parking spot with your apartment. So, you have to kind of work it out, figure it out. You might not get a spot right in front of your house, but that's one of the challenges and the trade-offs we have with a city like this. And as you know, we around transit nodes, it's really, if the developer thinks they can sell apartments without parking, then that's the market will dictate that. And again, like Councilor Wilson said, the ones that are getting the permits, there's a different scale for what those cost. So we've tried to mitigate and consider all things based on the fact that they couldn't build parking here and that the neighborhood is continuing to cry out for something to happen here. So this is there will be a little bit of pain felt.
Can I just add to what Councilor Klingon said? There was really substantial discussion around this when the Zoning Board of Appeals did take this up. Those meetings are public. There's video of that. If people have specific questions, I'd strongly encourage folks to go watch the video from those meetings.
Thank you, councilors, for that, for kind of giving context from that period. Just because Darcy, I know, has a tight timeline, maybe we do one more question, and then, well, actually, let me ask. I know Renee, you have a question. I see Nicholas and Ani's hand. Nick, your hand is top of the line. Is anybody's question one that is not directly for Darcy? Because I want to make sure.
There's actually two questions. One, does the parking study include winter months when we have snow emergencies?
So I'm not sure, Renee. I will share the parking study after this meeting.
Yeah, because right now I'm on Sewell Street, and we get people parking on our street from Temple, from Marshall.
Yep. No, I understand. I as the councilors were just mentioning, I know that parking will be a pain point in general around this project.
The other question I have is relates to the buildings on Grant Street that abut the lot. They are on the backside of the Star Market building, and they are on the property line.
Yes.
And I highly recommend that you have, before you start doing digging and planning and finalizing, that you have conversations with those people, because it's going to be a major shift and change as to what's happening there and what will be how far away is the new building going to be from that property line, and how, relates to their property. Because if you stand there and you look from the street to their property, you see the Star Market building, the air conditioning vents, all of those things.
Understood and agreed. We will make sure that we're communicating with folks before we get started along there.
Yeah, it's beforehand, because there was the reason I'm bringing this up is the development that was on the corner of Temple and Broadway was delayed because the housing that was on that smaller street that's one block up from where you make the right turn, there was a lot of pushback and pullback and delays because it wasn't clear as to what was going to be happening there. And then the people who were there were upset because nobody talked to them sooner than later.
Understood. And I was not involved in the original meetings, but I know that, there were public meetings and lots of discussion, and the neighborhood was involved in the planning. But we will absolutely make sure that we connect with folks before we get rolling there.
Councilor Clinton, you want to say what I'm probably about to say here?
I can just say, as the ward councilor, I mean, I've personally flyered all the abutters down Sewell Street and around, and there's been a heavy sort of public engagement, if you will, on this project. So yes, there probably are going to be people who maybe weren't paying attention, and now they're going to say, whoa, what's happening? And we will have to, address that, as well as maybe people have moved since, the project first started. So certainly, I'm happy to go around, flyer the area, and talk to people about what to expect, what might be coming. And I'm sure that I hope, and I will hold both development teams accountable to making sure that they stick to the construction, the mitigation plan, everything from rodents to the public way and parking and all that.
Yes, sure.
Just a matter of I'm in the communication business and gotten into major projects, and I found sometimes having a conversation, early on, rather than in the middle of something, helps to keep people's blood pressures down and concerns and worries and anxiety.
Renee, can I
Understood.
add?
I will,
Faster and
can,
easier.
Renee, can I just say, love to see a fellow comms person out here, strong agree. The great thing about this is that developer, the sort of partner developer, I don't call him the master developer, Mark Development, did what I believe to be the best job, at least from what I've seen, of engaging, of having those conversations, which is why so many of the neighbors, despite concerns about the parking, voiced support for this project in those zoning board of appeals meetings.
Thank
Well, I'm
you.
not so much talking about the parking now. I'm talking about the siting on the property and how it affects their property.
I'm talking about all that. Yes.
Oh, okay.
A lot of those sit down face-to-face meetings, they spent an immense amount of time meeting with those neighbors. So yeah, a strong agree that is the right way. And from my view, this developer has done that in this case.
Yeah. And I guess the last thing I want to stress is that if you're ever hearing, Renee, from a particular owner who is expressing anxiety, please share our contact information or
Sure.
encourage them to come to these meetings, because this is also like, we can just very directly address some of those conversations. I'm sure should happen offline.
Turnover on the properties in terms of since when this project was
Okay, yeah.
first started,
That's good to
in
know
terms
also.
of new owners.
So yeah, please always feel welcome to share my contact, and I can always connect them with the development team.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, we're at 6:06, and I did promise Darcy that I'd get her out around 6. So I apologize, Nick and Ani. I know your hands are up. I will try to
One
answer the
more, I
questions
think
to the
one
best.
more,
Of...
and then I do have to run, but
Okay. Nick,
yeah.
I see your
Glad
hand
to
up.
be
Yeah, I was gonna say mine is not specific for Darcy, so I don't know.
Okay. Ani, is yours? Ani, you there? Might have stepped away for a second. Okay. Well, in that case, I can address
here.
Nick's question.
Sorry,
Oh,
I just,
no, that's okay.
sorry about that. Oh. Sorry about that.
No, we can hear you now.
For just a moment. Great, super fast. So my question is on the financing, and I understand that there are kind of two financing approaches happening, one on the Beacon side and one on the Mark Development side. I think that's accurate. But my big picture question is, are they contingent upon each other? So, if the Beacon side gets the green light and everything comes together, but the private side has other struggles, it's not like one side can commence without the full package being approved and financed. Is that a fair assessment?
The goal, Ani, is that Beacon and Mark Development effectuate the whole project. So I'm not 100% answering your question directly. They are tied pretty closely together. And our goal is to deliver everything that we promised to the community, and that's what we're pushing forward to do.
Got it. Okay. So there was a possibility that one half of the project would get financed and potentially pursue the plan for that half without the other half.
The project was designed to be one project and move forward. And so that is what we are continuing to try and do. If we end up in a situation where one's financed and one's not financeable, that's a bigger conversation and challenge that I'm optimistic we're not going to have to navigate.
Right.
I'm not sure how else to say it. I'm not trying to skirt.
No, fair enough. And I understand there are like lots of unknowns, right? That's a larger conversation with many moving parts. But I guess my general thought was there wouldn't be a possibility that you would have a half-built project. It's always going to be, a full project that may shift if something that actually requires it in a big way. And I know that would be pretty rough if that were the case, but it's not like, there'd be a breaking of ground and half the project be built while the other just sits unfinished or vacant for many years. That would be very unfortunate.
Agreed. And that is not the goal here. If we were to be in a situation where that was a possibility, it would be a very open, direct conversation with the city about what was going on and why.
Right.
Not our preferred outcome. So that would be a serious conversation.
Right. No, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Can you feel my blood pressure going up?
Sorry, I know it's a tough topic.
If you're wondering what I'm doing most nights at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm lying wide awake, and some of this exact conversation is noodling through my head.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Fair. I get it. Don't mean to add added stress.
No, it's a good question. It's a fair question.
Awesome.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Thank you, Darcy, for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
yeah, as always, if people have questions, always happy to funnel them through to the development
Yeah,
team, but always
anytime.
appreciate this time.
I don't know if I'll see everybody before or after the holiday season. If I don't see folks again, have a great holiday season. If I do, we'll say it again.
You as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Darcy.
you. Okay, how do I get out of here? Leave, there it is. Oh, look at, there's this little person that's going out the door. That's new. I was looking
I
for
love
the caption. Have you seen
I
that?
love icons. I have not, because I'm always running the meeting, so I have to edit for everybody.
Yeah, instead of like the big leave button, it's like out the door.
Oh,
See you later.
cute. Yeah. I would love to join somebody else's meeting one of these days. Nick.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I had two, and now I'm thinking of three questions, so I'll try and keep it brief. The first one was just for on the parking front. I don't know if I had been on a meeting where this had previously been discussed, but curious like if there was what the mitigation strategies were, if some of the resources from the increased fees for the permits would be like sort of set aside for like increased enforcement in the area. Just because I know I think it can be pretty sparse in the general area at times anyway. So wondering if there's going to be sort of more enforcement just to make sure that like the cars that are parked in front of the units do have permits. And then second question was just on the reason for the project not being viable without the parking, or sort of with the parking because of environmental cleanup. Were there any like concerns from an environmental standpoint just for the general community as a whole, even without doing the cleanup? Is there any sort of toxic material sort of in the general area that won't be cleaned up as a result of the project not doing parking, like a parking on site?
Sorry, let me just take another thought.
Well, Ben, I think you should just take these questions down and bring them to people who could competently answer them. I mean, go ahead. We'll say what you were going to say.
No, that's okay. Yeah, on the mitigation measures, I don't have a good answer for it, so I will look back on that one for the parking piece. For the environmental concerns piece, I mean, this is definitely like, I mean, I'll affirm Councilor Klingen's comment there. I think this actually is a good question if you have any specifics about that the development team can give more context on, but they're definitely building in a way that is like affirmed by their environmental engineers. So there's no concern from the city's end that this is like.
Yeah, well, not just that. Just to put, again, this is why I want a full answer from, I don't know, say our engineering department or something, just if that's what it takes. But basically, to your question, DEP will be involved in any, remediation or if there's any risk to the public, like that would be. But the quick answer is my understanding is no. I think when they did the core studies, they were deep. It was deep down. But again, I don't want to if people have health concerns about what might be under there. Just to answer your question about the parking piece, yeah, it just the lot itself costs so much money, in terms of what Mr. Cohen was selling it for, and that the way the numbers played out. Apparently, again, this is all coming from the development team, so we kind of had a hard decision to make. I couldn't see anybody coming onto this property and building parking and having a viable project. At least that's what the experts basically were saying. So that's kind of where things are at. But as far as your question about what's under there and how they're going to deal with it, and whether or not that's a concern to the public. A fair question. I think we can get that answered by people who are much more knowledgeable about remediation in that process.
Can I
Yeah,
add on to what Councillor Klingon said right there? The remediation estimate, which was a ballpark one, I believe was $18 million to do that digging down and remediate what's under it. Basically, they found asbestos. It tested hot for asbestos. That site used to be the largest movie theater in the Boston area.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It's
And I
curtains or
believe it was
something.
the asbestos movie theater curtains or something that were buried there
Now you're bringing it back to me now. Yeah.
that resulted in that testing hot. The 18, you know, I'm sure the cost has even gone up since that $18 million initial ballpark figure. You know, it just would have, this project is barely, you know, barely getting the financing as is. It would have pushed it definitely into the unfeasible realm. We'd be sitting there looking at a, you know, vacant lot, you know, for, you know, generations to come probably. And that's why the decision was made. In terms of the mobility plan, other than the, you know, more expensive pricing for the limited number of special permits that would be available to residents, it was more on the facilitating car-free living side, I would say. Things like bike parking, Blue Bikes memberships, shuttle to the Gilman Square station, I believe, were all things that were, I'm trying to remember how many of those made it through to the final zoning ZBA thing, but those were the sorts of things that were brought up in the mobility plan.
Right. Right, because you have to remember the number of units that are actually going in versus the number of permits that are allowed to be applied for and received. There's still a big differential. So the developer's taking a risk that they can actually sell these, get these units occupied, rent these units. So we're all kind of in this together. It's been a really kind of crazy, scary process, and certainly without any, as I said, without any drawbacks to the community nearby. But it was what we when we weighed it out. So happy to have more conversations like this offline.
And one final bit of color on that, similar to what Councillor Klingon was saying, was that basically, if you talk to developers, they, if you take them at their word, they themselves would love to do car-free, parking-free facilities. It's their financiers, so they tell us, who are conservative and get cold feet about this and force the issue in terms of on-site parking. So if you're wondering about what forced the issue with these permits, it's on the financing side, it's the financiers' pressure to basically have some pressure release valve for folks who might need a car.
Yeah. And just one last thing I'll say, make no mistake that this wasn't something I took lightly. And through the entire process, I pushed for less permits. All through the process, I tried to eke out the best situation for us, as well as the city. And this is where we came to. So it was through a long, arduous process that we got here. Unfortunately, the numbers to work, this is where we are.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think I definitely think the benefits outweigh. I was just thinking maybe down the line to mitigate some people's concerns. Maybe I don't know how this would even come about, but saying there's going to be increased enforcement or something in the area just to make sure that residents feel like the city is obviously taking steps to just mitigate the increased traffic and parking from the units. It might be helpful for people, but
I'm here for increased parking enforcement citywide.
Got it.
With that, I'm going to shift us into the next item, which is just neighborhood updates from CAC members. So if anybody had anything, whether it's related to the urban renewal area or just kind of Winter Hill in general, that they wanted to share with other people in the group. Councillor Klingon, I saw you unmute. And then remute. Okay. With that, I'm going to shift into public comment. So we have 2 members of the public with us currently. I'm going to just give a moment if either of those members of the public want to raise their hand and make a comment. Otherwise we can, yep, okay. So I see Mary, your hand up.
Hi there. I think this might have been a conversation for the woman who had to leave, but it could last longer anyway. I'm curious if the new policy environment on things like tariffs and other policy issues might impact the process of what we're expecting here to start in the spring with the new election, I guess.
Yeah, not in a way that they have signaled to us. If that is of concern, they would communicate that to us. And if they do, we will definitely let people know. But that's also a question that we can raise kind of in public setting at a future time when the development team can join us.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions from the public? Cool. In that case, the last item I have on here is just adjournment. We went through these items kind of quickly, and so I just want to make sure, are there any other like questions or comments at this point on the development project?
Oh,
Colby?
sorry. Yeah, one thing that I did want to mention that I kind of like thought of after that conversation last month. As the construction gets underway hopefully next year, it would be great if there could be some, whether it's like a do not enter except for residents or basically some sort of deterrent for people kind of trying to cut around the construction to get onto 93 through Grant Street and some of the other sort of like neighborhood streets around there. I just know like right now that's currently a problem. I imagine that is going to become a much bigger problem as construction starts and congestion kind of starts around that area. So just something I wanted to mention.
Yeah, let me so anytime that
I can
Oh.
speak to that just because I just want to be clear about those signs. Those signs are, completely unenforceable in terms of, the Fourth Amendment and stopping people to check where they live and all that. But certainly, if it was a temporary thing, I think because the traffic commission are the ones that decide whether or not something like that goes up. And so,
Sure.
we can certainly advocate for it and see if it was going to be on a temporary basis, maybe. Just to ease that sort of pain of people trying to get around the construction. But there's no guarantees. Like I said, they kind of have the final word at the traffic commission. So, but certainly willing to talk about it.
Gotcha. That's also, I didn't know they were not enforceable. So that's, I guess, nice for me.
Although I will say there's an alternative strategy, which is basically it's the equivalent of, parking consideration where the parking department does not enforce resident parking for an event that's happening. That's on a need to know basis, right? So the public has no idea. I've increasingly become a fan of what I call traffic consideration, which is basically put up a do not enter there, but tell residents of that street that they can go down. And therefore it's on a need to know basis that we're not enforcing that.
Yeah.
Just another idea.
Yeah, so I will note that as they're starting or like as they're planning out construction, they put together what's called a construction management plan. I'm not sure exactly how, like if signs like this or something that factors into that when considering how people might try to avoid construction to get to the highway. So I will ask our engineering team about that. But in general, for like any sort of construction considerations, that is all reviewed by our engineering team when they are getting ready to start construction.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Nick.
Yeah, sorry, I'll try and keep it brief because I know we're getting late on time. But I was speaking to some neighbors, and a question that I keeps coming up is sort of what's going to happen with that other parcel on the corner where the liquor store is. And I think the answer that's come up in prior meetings is that this project is being completed independently of that. There's going to be no change as a result of this project, but it is within the purview of this group what happens on that parcel. It At what point would there become sort of a change or something that this group needs to discuss? Is that if there was a proposal from a developer for that, if the parcel sold, like at what point would that become a topic, I guess, just for so that I can answer if people were to ask.
Sure. So I'm just gonna. So if there was a development project put forward within the urban renewal area, that would definitely become something that was discussed within this forum. I will say also, again, my understanding of the past conversations was that because of how much of the urban renewal area is occupied by 299 Broadway, the group at a previous point had decided, let's not focus on that corner. Let's let this project play out and really give our focus to this, because it's meeting so many of the goals of the urban renewal plan overall. If this group decided that they wanted to spend more time talking about those corner parcels, we could talk more about that. So like if members of this group felt very strongly that they wanted to see something happening there, or they wanted to, like they had concerns with those parcels still being included because of, I don't know, like pressure that they're seeing, then we could also, have that conversation as a group in the shorter term, provide some sort of communication or thought to the redevelopment authority if there was a specific step or action that they wanted to see play out. And the redevelopment authority, who I don't want to speak on behalf of, could make a decision at that point. In terms of them actually facilitating a development process, though, I anticipate that they might feel similarly, that because so much of the parcel is being developed through this existing project, that is probably more of their focus right now. But we can have more of that conversation if members are particularly interested.
As a
Got it. Thank
designer,
you.
my concern is that the street scene, because the property on the corner there where the liquor store isn't maintained well, and it's an eyesore, and that the overall effect in the neighborhood would be you have this really beautiful space and buildings and activity, and then you've got this thing here on the corner that is a thumbs down in terms of what it's contributing to the overall street scene of the neighborhood. Because Winter Hill has been neglected for so long because of the recalcitrant behavior of the previous owner. And it's hurt this neighborhood. I've been here over 50 years, and it's just gotten seedier and seedier. And there's been turnover now, and there's places that are not occupied that are, the smaller stores. And I think that is part of it. If they stay, then there has to be some sort of commitment from the current owners to bring these buildings up to where they are not looking shabby.
That's kind of where I was
People
going
can
to.
argue about what the design would be and things like that. I mean, that's something, I'm not going to say what it should look like, but I think that should be a minimum there about that space.
Can I just add the sort of what we'll call the master developer, Mark Development, definitely has been in long time talks with the owner of the properties, with the businesses there. There's definitely an interest in purchasing those and potentially making those part of a larger project. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, we could talk about those properties. I have working knowledge of a lot of the sort of ins and outs and the people that own the different things. And, so certainly, I mean, if nothing else, and I'm not talking about, doing a taking, if nothing else, maybe we can, I don't know, just write a letter urging the liquor store owner to take the bars off the window at the very least. I mean, I don't know, like, so that's something we could discuss, because I hear you on that for sure.
Yeah, and also the billboard.
I mean, ultimately, you want that parcel to complement the new project. You can have this shiny new project there, and you want that parcel to at least complement it in some fashion.
Yeah, I mean, they could do some refacing on the building or something if they don't want to tear it down and they want to continue to use it and have something there. They can do at least that kind of commitment, design wise. I mean, they refaced one of the buildings over at the Assembly Row that had been there, you know, where the hospital offices are. And it looks a lot better.
Sure.
Is
I
that
think
something you can obligate them to do? Because I don't feel like that's a thing.
Yeah, I guess I would want to be, it sounds like people are, it sounds like people are interested in talking more about this and have designs concerns about that. I do want to strongly acknowledge that there are, like, I know that I've heard concerns expressed in this group about the liquor store. I do just want to acknowledge, like, there are, you know, businesses and organizations in that space, and so we just need to be aware of that in any conversations we're having about trying to improve the aesthetic with sort of that aesthetic focus. That's not to take away from what anyone is saying. I just want to be sensitive on that. And then to what Arthur is saying, you know, also being, we'll definitely have to be aware of like what the limits of what we can require or request are. If this group has specific things that they would like to articulate to the owners of those sites, that is also something that we can talk about if that's the route that people want to go down. From my, yeah, and I will take my guidance generally from this group. I will just say a lot of my focus is on the 299 Broadway project. It's obviously very large. It pulls a lot of staff time, and so I don't want to use that to ignore any of the concerns, and we can have more conversation around that. I just also want to be upfront around that. Ani, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just very quickly, I agree with what everyone's saying about the liquor store in the corner there. I do think that we have to be thoughtful of the fact that there's only so much that the city could say to a private property owner unless it takes, very dramatic steps to take property, and then it's, I would love to see that space look better. I'd love to see the exterior look more inviting and more engaged with the neighborhood, and the billboard to go away as well, to be quite honest. But I don't know if the city has the ability to do that. And it would be more of a request than a require, right? Like it would be, hey, can you be a good neighbor? But I know for a fact that Mark Development like had many conversations with them in hopes of having that corner be part of the overall project, and I don't think that was of interest to them at that time.
Yeah, let me
So-
just be clear. I don't really know how we got here, because I'm certainly no one suggesting. Yeah, I was the only thing I suggested, if people felt strongly, like send a letter of like a recommendation letter or something like that. Again, I'm just spitballing here. I'm not even like
100%. I think that's right. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
just want to make that clear.
No, totally. I didn't mean to suggest that you were suggesting something else.
not
But
you,
yeah,
no.
I think it would be fantastic to get them to engage, with the overall development. I guess it's just a thought on like how to strategically do that to have them actually respond in a way that's, that gets something done.
Sure.
Right.
Right. And I know the owner of the liquor store. I've known him since my whole life. And I've mentioned this to him, but we were very sensitive and careful when we decided not to take those lots. That's why we're here. That's how we got here. But it's not like, yeah, we should be very careful and how we sort of approach this. But I hear what people are saying loud and clear, and I agree. And maybe there's a like what we call like a quick solution, a quick build solution. I mean, maybe there's a discussion to be had further, like on a larger something. But no, I appreciate this conversation. Certainly, it's good to hear that a lot of people feel the same, that this liquor store is could use some improvement. And certainly, if economic development could approach them or something, and maybe there's block grant money or something, help them improve. I don't know,
Right.
but it would be good.
There's
Yeah.
The thing there too
Sorry.
is that if and when they have the other buildings built, the number of people there that are being close proximity to that particular establishment will find themselves having a larger increase of customers at that site. And they might want to look at, you know, upscaling it a bit, you know, to appeal to the new residents.
Arthur, I see that your hand's up.
Hi, this doesn't need to be addressed now, but I feel like it's going to be pretty unavoidable in the coming future. I just want to understand how this committee is going to end up intersecting with the Mystic River outfall and sewer separation. This was kind of what I was talking about earlier in my questions about Temple Street being redesigned. The entire neighborhood's going to get completely redug up and redone for a few years. So I just want to understand how that's going to affect our committee and like this project also.
I am not super familiar with the process. I would say the scope of what this group is discussing is very focused on the urban renewal plan. So if there are relevant ways that it seems like it is intersecting, I want those to be able to come up here, but I am by no means like an expert on or very even minimally plugged into that process. So I don't imagine that unless there's a very clear point at which it is intersecting with the implementation of urban renewal here, that it will be a big part of these conversations. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Just to that point, yeah, Ben, you said it right. I mean, this group has a defined, you know, purpose, and but Arthur, I hear your concerns and the anxiety about the outfall project. I'm happy to talk to you about that offline, and you know, there's always you can start a group. There's always other ways to, you know, figure out how to help mitigate the pain of having a project like that come through. So happy to talk about that at some point.
Yeah, I was just curious because earlier we were talking about like the use of Grand Street and stuff. So I was just wondering how we might consider like those kinds of changes affecting this project potentially.
You know, it's not lost on me, and so I'm going to bring it up. Make sure I'm bringing it up that you know, just the fact that this project will be happening potentially when the outfall project is done is you know is problematic to some degree, right? It's going to be so I'm not sure how the city plans on. I don't know if they, you know, I'm sure that they're thinking about it, knowing staff, but I'm not sure how they plan to approach it or mitigate anything. So I can find out about that for sure.
Right. Any other comments or questions? Cool. With that, I'm going to shift us back to the final item, which is adjournment. I do just want to make a note. So this group has been meeting, or previously had been meeting the second Thursday of the month. This might be a conflict for some of our members, so I will likely survey members to see if there's a different time that works for everybody. It's only one person so far that's really been having a conflict at this time, but I'd like to find a time that works for everybody. If there are any major updates, then I will plan to host the December meeting. But we also don't need to do the every month cadence. We can also skip months occasionally. And December can be a particularly difficult month. So it is likely that I will send a message the first week of December just to let people know that we won't be meeting until January or sometime early in 2025. But if at that point there's anything specific that people want to discuss, please also reach out and we can find a time to do a meeting. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for the time this evening.
Thanks.
See you again.
Take care.